Good morning again, Flatbelly, fellow travelers, and coffee chat friends. Another follow-up on our last meeting. A few days late, of course, but I had a busy week. Our topic was the power of yes. And we had a great meeting. I think the count was we were about 19 people there at Sardinia's, which was a surprise to me because we had changed locations. Some of you may know by now that Mackenzie Cole has closed down for the month of April, changed hands, being renovated and so on, so we had to move, and we had a great turnout anyways. Welcome, we had a few new guests, Jennifer, Dylan, I mean, you may have been there before, and Sandra, so welcome to Coffee Chat. What else was there? There was we opened with a few announcements. There was somebody mentioned Guy Finley as a great storyteller. I'm not sure, I haven't had a look at his work yet. There was a suggestion right near the end for our next coffee chat, which is to do with fear, because the idea of fear came up. Somebody mentioned, why don't we talk about fear and how fear plays in our life. I think it's a valuable thing because we all feel it. And if we are of the impression that everything has value, what value does fear have in our lives? Must have something, right? We also had, this wasn't at the meeting, but a few days later, there was a few of us got together, those who showed interest in it, in terms of this speakers forum thing that we're planning to have more speakers come out, but not so much in coffee chat, but as a concordant sort of a concordant opportunity, or it would be, whereas coffee chat would stay as discussion forum, this would be a speakers forum type of thing. And we had a few people come out, showed interest, who wanted to get involved with that. The suggestion was to have the name, Rick had a great suggestion here, in memory of Buckingham Nicks' song Crystal, which he played at one of our coffee chats one time, Crystalline Knowledge, which has a little bit more of an edge, as he says to it, than, say, Saskatoon Speakers Forum. So that's something that's out there, and it sounds great to me. I really like it. We want to present speakers who will talk about things that the mainstream doesn't. And actually, we have a location, which is Sardinia's for our next meeting. We have a speaker, awesome speaker. You're going to really, really love this guy. He's really dynamic and really thinks outside the box, you might say. Those are the announcements anyways. So move forward with the comments I had, and unfortunately I don't film, well, it's fortunate I guess for those who are there, but we don't film or record what goes on at Coffee Chat. There was lots of stuff shared. We were all over the map in many cases, so the only thing I'm going to share here really is what I had to share. So if you have anything else that you want to share, just chime in on the forum or send an email, whatever you want to do, okay? Now this idea of the power of yes came about as a result of myself and my daughter going to the city about a little over a week ago, and she began to speak about this movie called Yes Man. She asked me if I'd ever watched it, and I hadn't, because I don't tend to be a great huge movie watcher. Haven't watched a lot of movies in my life, though I do enjoy them for sure. And she put quite a pitch on me. She put a pitch on me to the point where halfway through what she was saying, we were saying to her, Coffee Chat, because it was something that I don't know if we'd ever covered yet, the actual word yes, and saying the word yes. I don't know if we actually have. So away we went with it. And for those of you who are as geeky as I am, and like to look at the origin of words, I had a quick look at it, and of course, why would I do that? Huh? I did though anyways. Yes comes from the Old English, yes, or yaise, and it means may it be so. And the word may comes from the Old English, having power. So we could say that yes in its origin means having the power to be so, or having the power to be so. Yeah, that's right. I also like to look at the other side of the same coin, the word no. Where does that come from? Well, that also comes from the Old English, two parts really, nay, which meant not, with the prefix o or a, so it would be neo or nea, which means ever. So not ever, you might say. As we can see in just those also hold up as being opposites, right? The former being of the creative, having the power to be so. That's kind of creative, right? Allowing creativity. The other one putting an end to it, or truncating what's going on. Not ever. So they're definitely opposites. We did watch the movie Yes Man, and yes, I did enjoy it greatly. As I tell my little impression of it, you may, if you've watched the movie, you may pick up errors and so on, but I'm just talking about the gist as I got it. That's all. I'm not trying to recount the story completely. The main character in there is played by a guy named Jim Carey, a very humorous guy, and he has excuses for everything. I mean, here's a guy who's always in a rush. He has no time for anything. His wife has left him. He won't go with his friends. He's got an excuse every time they ask him to go out and so on. And then there's one scene there where he runs into an old friend. And, of course, Jim Carrey's character is bummed out, as he usually is. And his friend is this really upbeat guy. And you know how annoying an upbeat, positive guy can be if you're not so. It can be quite annoying, right? And this is how the impression he had. But this friend of his, he had this flyer. And it was for a yes seminar. Jim, you got to go to this. You know, it'll make you feel upbeat. It'll change your life and so on. And Jim's character, of course, is being polite. He takes the flyer, but he's really has no time for it at all, right? But flashing forward a little bit, you see a scene where he's, once again, at a bummed out stage. He's in his apartment or whatever, and he finds this flyer again. And he looks at it, and perhaps, if I remember correctly, the event was taking place the following day or in a few days or whatever. He said, well, what? He says to himself, why not go down and check it out? Just have a look anyways. So he goes down, and the next scene is he's in this room with all these pumped up people, you know, and he's signing up for this thing. And then another scene later, you see him sitting there discreetly, kind of off in the back of the room, hoping nobody will see him, and there the seminar's about to begin, and his friend waves at him from the other side of the room, and then comes and sits beside him, and to Jim's chagrin, really, because he wanted to be kind of left alone there, right? And not made a spectacle of. And within moments later, boom, there's music comes on the stage, there's smoke machine producing smoke, there's flashing lights and so on, and through all this walks this Messiah-looking character with his silver hair. He's an older guy, chiseled face, nice form to his body. He has this $1,000 Armani suit on, polished shoes, cufflinks and so on, and he comes out and everybody's silent. This is their guru walking out, you know. And the first thing he says is there anybody new in the room today? To which Jim's buddy stands up and says, yeah, he is, you know. And Jim, of course, is like, oh no, you know, that's not what he wanted at all. And everybody in the room turns, there's 1,000 people in the room, they all turn to him and they're all going to rah-rah him, right? And this guy from the stage starts addressing Jim, wanting to figure out why he's there, and Jim's like, nah, forget about it. And as soon as he said anything to do with, no, of course, the whole crowd starts, no man, no man, no man. And the guy starts, it engages the guy on the stage even more and more, and Jim's not having any of it. He's trying to deflect it. So then the guy from the stage walks down to Jim, sits right in front of him. Now the whole room is all turned and focused. Now he's the center of attention, the last thing he wants. But with the magic of this messianic character, within moments, Jim is almost entrapped in this cult of yes, where he says yes to everything. And it's as though he makes a covenant to say yes to everything in life. And thus he goes forward from the seminar with this curse upon him, essentially. And he begins to say yes to everything. And it changed his life, really. he said yes to a whole bunch of things that he wouldn't normally have said yes to. He meets this girl who he's really fascinated with. His friends notice a difference in him. He feels better in many cases. And this seems to be working for him. Though in time, not in a long time, but in time it starts to, there's something in him that says, actually, maybe I shouldn't be saying yes to everything. But he doesn't know how to do it because he feels like he's under a curse. As an example, there's this one point where his neighbor, this older woman, asks him if he wants relief. And he's not sure what that means at first, but he sort of gets what it might mean, and because she feels that he's under a lot of stress and so on. So he leaves, and then it's almost like an omen happens to him. This dog chases him, he gets caught, and as he trips and falls and what have you. So he realizes, okay, maybe this curse, I got to go back. So he goes back, and moments later you see this scene. It's kind of disturbing actually, because the lady is more than twice his age probably, and he's lying on her bed, and all of a sudden you see her head go down, and his eyes go like this, like, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden you see you see her hand reach up, and her false teeth go into a cup, you know, and it really disturbed him anyways. But he, you know, his eyes were like this, you know, like, holy smokes. Restricted movie perhaps, but it's implied, you see. It's not, they don't actually show us what's going on there. See, but, and it got to the point where he realized he had to somehow remove this curse. So there's another scene later where he finds out where this guy is doing a seminar again. He goes there, he stalks the silver-haired guy essentially, and he waits till he's coming out of the seminar to get in his car, and it happens to be that he's driving a convertible Rolls Royce. Jim jumps in the back of the Rolls Royce when this guy's taken off. It freaks the bejesus out of him basically, and he crashes into something, causes an accident. They both end up in the hospital, unbeknownst to both of them, in the same ward on different sides of one curtain. A few scenes later, Jim is talking to his friend and complaining about what's happened with this is what the result of yes, and so on and so on. And blasting through this curtain is this guy that was in the accident with him in the Rolls Royce. Why the heck did you jump in my car? And Jim basically told him, because I wanted to, you know, I wanted you to remove that curse. Saying yes all the time isn't working for me, kind of thing. And the old guy says, what did you say yes to everything for? And Jim's reply was kind of like, well, I thought I had to. I felt I had a covenant to do that. And the old guy says, well, you don't have to say yes to everything. You only say yes to what feels right in your heart. And that to me was the key of the movie. It didn't end there, but to me it was the key to it. And now I'm gonna move on to something different here, which may sound a little weird at first, but I promise I will do my best to wrap it up at the end. It's important. I'm going to listen to it a couple of times if it matters to you. But it's my impression of what's actually going on a little bit deep within us. Because after all, at Coffee Chat here, we try to learn something about ourselves, right? Because we've been talking over the last couple of Coffee Chats about this idea of conscience, something that, this awareness, intelligence that exists within us. And you'll notice that in our education as human beings, typically here in the Western world, Western Hemisphere anyways, we're mostly, as human beings, taught things through our head. The focus is on the head, like that's the impression of where the mind is and this sort of thing. Whereas in some Eastern cultures, you may not be aware of this, but you probably are, there's a lot of focus also on the lower parts of the physiology. In China, for example, there was a lot of focus on yoga and qigong and these sorts of things, which focus on the development of, you might call it, awareness or feelings and so on of the lower parts of the nervous system. Which brings me to a book that I ran across about the same time that I'd watched that movie. It's called, I don't know if you can read it here, but it's a very old book. It's called Psychoanalysis and the Unconscious, written by a guy named D.H. Lawrence, and I believe he's the same guy who wrote some novels. I believe there was one called Lady Chatterley's Lover. There was another one, perhaps Sons of Lovers. There was a few books about lovers anyways. And when he wrote this, which was considered pseudoscience, perhaps metaphysical at the time, in the 1920s, when there were a lot of books written around that topic, scientists tried to slander him basically by calling him a pornographer, which at the time was not a great title to have. Perhaps it's not a great title to have now either, but especially then. I think it had to do with his lover books, which were basically fiction, is all they were. But later on he was exonerated. I think he was considered a great literary contributor, essentially. That's my understanding, anyways. But that's just aside, just to qualify the guy. But I read this book, and it was very interesting because he goes through how, in the early stages of our development as human beings, in this incarnation, you might say, within the womb of our mothers, we're attached. We're not individual in a way, or we're not individual. We're tied to, or we're not divided. We're tied to our mothers through this umbilical cord, and the point of connection of the umbilical cord is our bellies. So therefore, the first point of intelligence that took place within our physical bodies, which is the creation of what we know ourselves to be today, at least the expression of what we know ourselves to be today, was there. And therefore his impression that was the beginning of the intelligent core. And everything else was fed from there. So as you can imagine, the development of the body took place from the belly, and the head would be, and the limbs and so on would have gotten developed later. You could watch it in the early development of the you know, from the when the sperm and the egg fertilize, and there's a little the growth of the early human being begins, and then it sort of, you see the early example of the spinal column stretching out from there. So everything's fed from here, anyways. And there's a lot of parallels that we can see in our lives of this, but that'll be something that maybe I can connect later if I don't. But what I'm saying, the point being, the foundation of our bodies is the abdomen. Just like the foundation of a house, you don't see it very much, but it's down there. And if it's without it, you don't have anything else. Without this, we don't have anything else in the physical body, right? Because that's where it began. All of us, the nutrients, the waste elimination, the intelligence, all of that came from here first and fed everything else. When we were born, however, that connection was severed, literally. And at that point, we began to feed everything, for the most part, the opposite direction, from the head down to the belly. And so much of what was inputted then, from then on, was through the head. The smell, the ear, the hearing, the sight, the taste, the consumption, the breathing, most of the learning, the logic, the mathematics, the science, all of this was headspace, to the point where, especially in the Western world, feelings and these sort of things that kids would have, I've got feelings and so on, was almost considered silliness. Oh, that's all in your imagination, type of thing. So that was discouraged. This was encouraged. Therefore, the big switch, right? As you can see then, and this may sound odd, or maybe you see me getting way off track of yes. What's this got to do with yes, Steve? Well, I'll bring it back eventually. I will bring it back, I promise. It's just a little diversion here to try to make a point, to try to step us outside the box a little bit. That's all. So as you can see, a very new journey has begun, from being inside and connected to now being outside and apparently disconnected. The whole thing has changed, right? And what we can see here is that from inside our mother's womb, our whole production was taking place here. the whole communication and the feeding was taking place here, and then it changed to here. What's interesting to me, and I don't know, I've never heard anybody else say this, it's just an observation I made. Ancient wisdom always talks about the heart, the heart, the heart. It's interesting to note that the heart, the physical heart, but we know they're not just talking about the physical heart, it's the area sort of thing, right? But if you look at the area between the head and the belly, we find the heart in the middle of that. The combination of the two, the equating out, the agreement of the two, the concordance of the two. That's what's interesting here, I think, because listening to our heart can be very important when we're going to say yes, right? So what I would say then is, from just that, when we can have a, what was the word I used? A union, you might say, or an agreement, or a, searching for the word here, of subconscious knowing, which seems to be, you know, you hear people saying a gut feeling. Can't really put a thing on it, but there's something about it. I should have listened to my gut on that one. It's like a subconscious. Intelligence, yes, but not quite conscious, as in the rationale. When we can have a meeting of those, of the subconscious and the conscious. In other words, when we go from the belly to the head and back, we pass the heart. We combine the two, and we have the heart. Because the belly always tells us our true feeling. Our mentality, our rationality, we make agreements and plans and oaths and covenants and so on. So if there's a covenant or an oath made in the rationale, and this, the belly, doesn't agree with it, it doesn't feel quite right, then our heart is mixed. It's like double-minded at that point. Whereas if it's together, if there's agreement, so this, in a way, in that case, would override the covenant. You see what I mean? This is, I'm going to read a bit here just so I don't miss something. This, I feel, is the importance of the depth of what the silver hair guy had to say to Jim in that hospital room. Yes, it's fine to embark on a life of more yeses. And yes, the word yes opens us up to expressing the power to make things so, to make it so. What we have to be aware of, though, is what our core is saying. Also, what deep down in our gut. We make decisions, yes, through our heads. And only when we have a meeting of the feelings also should we really say yes to what's in our heart. Because as I see it at this point, our heart is kind of like a combination of what our deeper set feelings are of the gut and the rationale as well. Halfway. It's interesting to note, actually, that those who would not kill during the wars were considered cowards. And another expression for them was yellow belly. Some of you who are aware of the idea of auras, or the auras of the plexus, the color spectrum that is shown on ancient diagrams. The one of the solar plexus, and solar means sun, which is yellow, which is the gut area, is often depicted as yellow. I just thought that was an interesting side that I remembered somebody saying one time. Perhaps those who were the yellow bellies had a more developed sense of feeling, and therefore they felt as well as were rational. And those who could feel could not kill a man they did not know. Only a purely rational man who has made an oath and to his country or whatever to do what he's told, to kill those men over there, to kill those whoever, because we're told to. Only they made good killers, perhaps. Just a thought anyways. Whereas those who felt, it didn't feel right in their heart to say yes to that. Right? And we as people who are opening to developing our capacities can rekindle our yellow bellies and couple those sensations with our rational faculties, and thereby meet ourselves in the center, in our hearts, and say yes in accordance to our heart's true desires. This, to me, is the true power of saying yes. Thank you again for your reception, and I would love to share with you again in a few weeks. My name is Steve Maloney. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.